Good evening. Today is Tuesday, May 20th, and the time is 6:30 p.m., and I would like to call this regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Copeland, Webb,
Here.
Stiegel,
Here.
Onken,
Here?
Caliphate,
Here.
Hauk, Serato.
Here.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, item number 1, approval of minutes. Consider approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission April 22nd, 2025 regular meeting minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the Planning and Zoning of April 22nd, 2025.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes from Commissioner Serato and a second from Vice Chair Stiegel. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Great, that passes. Citizen comment period. The Planning and Zoning Commission welcomes comments from citizens early in the agenda of regular meetings. Speakers are provided with an opportunity to speak during this time on any agenda item or any other matter concerning city business, and they must observe the 3-minute time limit. So I will open that now. We have more people here than usual today, but none for citizen comments. So we'll close that and keep moving. Consent agenda, we've got one item today, the final plat for Phase 2 of Limestone Creek subdivision. Would anyone like to make a motion on that?
I make a motion to consider approval of a final plat for Phase 2 of Limestone Creek subdivision.
Okay,
Second, Mayor.
I'm going to give it to you because I heard you first. Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda item from Commissioner Serato and a second from Vice Chair Stiegel. Is there any discussion on the item? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, that motion passes. Which brings us to our conditional use, or consider impossible action. Consider approval of a conditional use permit regarding the IH-35 overlay district regulations for a proposed Pedernales Electric Corporation, PEC, substation located at 275 North Old Highway 81, CUP-25-0128. Mr. Lutz.
All right, good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. CUP tonight, a little different on this one. It's not a typical commercial development. This is an electric substation that is being constructed in order to help provide power to the rest of the city. So the development is going to consist of some new screening walls, one small maintenance building, landscaping, sidewalks, detention, and driveway connections. That's kind of the extent of this. The proposed driveway is aligned with an existing street. That's going to eliminate some existing conflicts for safety. And then the southern driveway was approved. You'll notice on the plans it's slightly larger than what you normally see for our curb cuts. This was due kind of to the site layout limitations and the need for some of the larger vehicles that's serving that site. So when they swing in, they have to take a different angle. So again, we've reviewed that with transportation, engineering, public works. They didn't have any concerns with that. Moving into kind of the layout of the substation, you'll see here plan left or west is the enlarged driveway. Again, you can see that long throat so they can straighten out those vehicles, and then there's secondary exit to the right, which is north on this property. It's hard to see here, but there are sidewalks along the right-of-way that are going to be constructed, and then I'll get into some of those renderings showing those. This is kind of a artistic rendering of what this will look directly across the street, so you can kind of see the thrift store across the street and the water tower. They are proposing to match the red brick as closely as possible to our design standards. So you'll see the downtown core is probably one of the few areas that really follow our downtown or our I-35 overlay as far as red brick and white limestone. So the building we're in, the building's across the street, thrift store. So they did look at other color options, but that was probably the best one that'll kind of fit the existing environment. So here's some photos from the street, kind of looking in at the site, and this, the water tower is highlighted so you can kind of see what the proposed view will look like. So again, this is not a commercial enterprise. This is an electric substation, but I think they've done a good job of trying to limit its impact in the area, especially considering the need for power with our development. So the reason this location was discussed or chosen was because it meets some of their location criteria. And PEC's here, they have a little presentation that they'll go through and kind of speak to that more. Here's kind of the second image, again, highlighting the Hayes thrift store, and then what that image will look like from across the street. This is the wider driveway that I was discussing that's teed up to that intersection. So your options tonight are approve as presented, approve with modifications, or deny. Staff is recommending option 1 at this point, does meet the requirements of the I-35 overlay. I can answer any questions. If it's specific questions to PC, I'll be glad to turn it over to them. So, thank you.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
The wall, it says it's a precast wall. Is it just precast with the color of the red brick, or does it have like a red brick imprint on the formwork? How's that?
I've not seen the actual pattern that was selected from their company, but they are the pattern precast. So
Okay, to be
if
a
you're driving
precast
down
pattern.
Kohlers, you'll see there's the one near the Public Safety Center. There's a small substation there. So they've got that same precast textured stuff. So again, they may not have our exact color palette for this building and what's in there, but the goal is to match as closely as possible.
That was
We might
fun.
need to load up the other slideshow.
Yes, I think Jeffrey, I know you're back in the AV room, but I did copy that other presentation over, if you can pull that one up.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners, City of Planning staff. I'm Diana Gonzalez. I am an external relations representative with PEC, Pedernales Electric Cooperative, your electric utility. And I appreciate the opportunity to just very briefly share a little bit overview of PEC and a little bit about this project. So, being your electric utility, I'm sure that you're very familiar with PEC, but I want to say that first and foremost, we are very focused and committed to providing safe and reliable electric service to our membership. And PEC was founded in 1938. We are the largest electric distribution cooperative in the nation, and we are serving 315 miles of transmission line. We serve 8,100 square miles of Central Texas, and we serve all are part of 24 counties and 45 franchise cities. And your city of Kyle is one of our franchise cities. We have over 425,000 meters in our PEC territory, and in our Kyle district alone, we are serving 82,000 meters, just so you know. So to share just a little bit about the impact of this substation, just so that you'll know, this substation will definitely support the tremendous load growth demands in the Kyle area. The substation is ideally located and will provide cost savings since it is next to transmission and distribution circuits that have been here over 50 years. Our substation will be located, the location actually allows for ideal road accessibility to serve your community here in Kyle in the area. And the location of the substation is not environmentally or culturally challenged. It provides contingency for distribution circuits to increase the reliability of the electrical system, our electrical system, and the topology is ideal for substation needs. And then, of course, most importantly, it meets PEC's top priority for safety and reliability in serving our PEC membership and your city of Kyle and surrounding area. So I want to thank you for this consideration. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any questions for staff for the applicant at this time? Doesn't seem like it. Okay. Would someone like to bring a motion for the item?
I'll move to approve as presented.
Second.
Option 1.
Was that you? Yeah. Okay. We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Webb and a second from Commissioner Hauk. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There we go. Motion passes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Okay, next, consider approval of a conditional use permit regarding the IH-35 overlay district regulations for a proposed Pollo Regio restaurant located at 21565 IH-35. Pollo Regio CUP-25-0127. Ms. Sharp.
All right, good evening, Commissioners. Kayla Sharp, Senior Planner. So tonight we have a conditional use permit for you for a proposed Pollo Regio, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly, restaurant. This is on the I-35 northbound frontage road. If you're familiar with like the Windmill Center building where like Abuelita's Bakery is, it's just south of that. They share a driveway. So this will be just under 4,000 square feet, and the materials consist primarily of brick and stone with appropriate architectural features to accent the building. Just kind of a little bit of history, there was a conditional use permit previously approved for this in February of 2024. Just as a reminder, CUPs are valid for 1 year from the approval date unless work has started on the project. In this case, no work has started thus far, and so the previous CUP expired in February of 2025. So they have a site plan that was recently approved. They're ready to go on that, and they have a building permit that is approved but not yet issued. They just need to make payment, which they'll do once they get this CUP taken care of, and then they can start work. So here are the renderings. The top is the front that will face I-35. The bottom is the side that you would see kind of from the driving up the northbound frontage road. I know the percentages are a little bit hard to read on there probably, but it's pretty much entirely brick and stone. And then here is the back side and the other side with the drive-through window that kind of faces north, and the dumpster enclosure as well. Here is kind of the site and landscape plan in one. So this meets the requirements of the I-35 overlay, as does the photometric sheet. And then here's kind of a breakdown of the facade. You can see it's pretty much entirely brick and stone. I do want to point out the glazing is the percentage before the brick and stone, so it's that percentage is from the entirety of the facade, and then the brick and stone is what's left after that. So that's why if you count it up, it's going to be over 100%. So just clarify that. So your options tonight are approve as presented, approve with modifications, or deny. Staff has found this request to be compliant with the I-35 overlay, and the site and photometric plans are compliant with Chapter 53 and other applicable codes, and we are recommending approval. Any questions?
Maybe?
I think it's great that they are compliant with the I-35 overlay. I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay,
You want to steal it? All right.
Gotcha.
we have a motion to approve from Commissioner Serrato and a second from Commissioner Webb. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Are we sure that the utility boxes to the rear are actually going to be painted roughly the same color as the brick, or do we need to somehow create a barrier around that of some kind? I'm not seeing any conduits or anything.
We do require screening of utilities and things like that. So as part of the final site inspection, when planning staff goes out to just verify that the building matches the materials, and they have all of their landscaping and parking and sidewalks and crosswalks and things like that, that's something we would also look at. So if at that point they're getting ready to get their certificate of occupancy and those aren't painted, that's something we would ask them to correct before they get their CO.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion?
I think they did a good job for being a fast food restaurant, matching the design standards for the I-35, so
Okay, let's vote. All those in favor of approving the conditional use permit, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Done. That's done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have a presentation, discussion, and P and Z Commission feedback regarding the city's Unified Development Code, UDC. Ms. McCollum.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. We're really excited to be talking code with you as a commission tonight. So this, as you know, was a recommendation of our comprehensive plan to really kind of take a holistic look and effort at our code and bring it together in a unified development code. We went out for an RFP, had a short list items, really went out and then got Freeze and Nichols to be kind of our consultant to really help bring this together. And at the same time, we're also going to be looking at updating our engineering manual at the same time. So we have a lot of internal city staff that's been working on it, but you as the commission kind of get to be the gatekeepers of the code as well. So I'm excited to start this process with you. Chance does have a presentation that he's going to go through with his team. We're hoping to really kind of gauge and get some of your feedback early on in this process to make sure as we go through it, we're hitting the mark because we're at the beginning. So let's figure out all the pitfalls or different things that we're looking at to try to fix. Staff's got a laundry list ourselves, but we're hoping to make sure that we include everything that you guys have in mind as well. And then as you saw in the packet, there really is some more engaging kind of worksheet type questions. So I think if we don't get to those tonight, if you are willing to fill those out and get back to it would be great too. And we can hand that over to kind of their team as we continue to do that. So with that, Chance, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Chance Sparks, Freeze and Nichols, San Marcos, Texas. So I'm really excited to be working with y'all on this project to rewrite your development codes, really for two key reasons. One, quite honestly, y'all are local for me. We work across the Southeast U.S., but it's nice to get to work at home in this case. And two, I have a lot of passion for codes, which sounds weird, but it's because your development code is where the rubber meets the road on taking your comprehensive plan and your vision into a reality. When we write a comprehensive plan, about 75 to 80% of that is relying on the private sector to do something to advance your plan forward. Your way of doing that's typically within a development code. So really excited to get the opportunity to work on this. I'm joined this evening by Evan and John, both members of the project team. Evan's another planner out of San Marcos. John is an engineer out of our Austin office. All of us bring a lot of public sector experience with us. So kind of what we explain is we've sat in your seats before. We know the feelings that y'all are having, probably some of the things y'all are thinking along the way. Our goal tonight, though, is to hear from you about what are those things that you've encountered as commissioners or that you hear about as commissioners that you think could be represented as solutions within your development regulations somewhere, or things that are growing really well where you say, hey, this piece of it, don't change it. It's working for us. This is our overall organizational chart. I'm not going to go into this in depth. You'll be seeing multiple of us throughout the project kind of coming in and out based on our individual expertise. I'll be kind of a consistent thread through all of this. One of the really nice things about this effort is you're tackling your development code and your engineering manuals at the same time. That's important because those two documents speak to each other more than anything else you'll find in your code of ordinances. And that's because the technical standards of engineering, if you take a different approach to, say, a street right-of-way or a street section design, that changes how the land use and the use design on the private side of that property line interacts with it. So if you can bring those together and have them talk to each other seamlessly, it makes for a better code experience and it makes for better consistency, where maybe your staff doesn't find themselves in difficult interpretation situations and things like that. So it's a great best practice that y'all are able to follow. The stage we're in right now is what we call a code diagnostic. It's exactly what it sounds like. We take your existing regulations, we kind of assess them. Think of it like a physical for your development regulations. What we're going to be thinking about is how can we operationalize those things that come out of your comprehensive plan and your other adopted plans. We structure these typically as issue statements with some recommendations, and we augment this with stakeholder input, mainly looking at different types of code users. Everything from your neighbor down the street that is thinking about installing a fence, from their perspective, all the way to a large scale development, to your city staff, and kind of everything in between. Boards and commissions are a critical point to that because you see a wide variety of different issues come up from a wide variety of actors. So that's part of why we want to hear from you. When we do this code diagnostic, and what we think about in our assessments is how do you make your code user-friendly? One of the things that we talk about is that a strict code and a streamlined code they're not the same thing, or they're not mutually exclusive. You can be strict, but also be highly efficient. When we think about development process and what developers think about, they think about time as a key metric for them. The old time is money adage. So we think a lot about that user-friendly. Defensible. We would prefer you not have to go to court. It's not a great place to be. We don't like being witnesses for that. Y'all won't either, so we try to avoid that. We want to facilitate your development process. Part of what we mean by that is those concepts within your comprehensive plan and your other adopted plans. There's kind of a philosophy that the more something aligns with what you want, the easier its pathway should be to approval. Conversely, if it's something you don't want, its pathway should have a few more barriers to it. And then lastly, think about innovative solutions and approaches. What's going to be the right fit for Kyle as we go forward with this? And what are the right solutions? We're not going to just drop something in because it's cool and fancy and innovative. If we're going to drop something in like that, it's going to be because it's the right fit along the way. We have looked at your plans. I'm not going to go through all this in depth. You don't want me to. You experienced the comprehensive plan in most cases. The key things that we're going to note is that you have a major goal within your plan. It's called General F4, and that splits into 11 different recommendations. They're very detailed, so we're going to be pulling that into this diagnostic report along the way, and it covers everything from green spaces to block links and everything in between. You also have a recommendation with that for some structural aspects of this. They recommend very specific approaches to zoning. We're going to evaluate that and see if it's the right choice. It recommends, for example, a place type approach to zoning. That can work, but we want to make sure it fits where you're trying to get to and fits your existing development models. Looking at overlays, focus areas, things like that. The Vibe network that comes up frequently with your efforts in essentially multimodal transportation more than recreation. And then looking at your revised subdivision standards. Your subdivision ordinance is the least glamorous of your development regulations. It may be the most important for your built environment outcomes. So that's part of what I want you to think about with this. Again, we look at the Vibe master plan. You have a draft downtown master plan that we will look at, even though it's not adopted, just to see if there are pieces that need to come out of that. And of course, your Kyle design guidelines, which you heard referenced here this evening. But again, what we're here for is to talk with y'all. So you'll see kind of these big 8 questions here. The way I like to approach this is approaching it, recognizing that this is your time. I want you as a commission to take this down the trail that you think fits you best. If we don't answer all these, that's fine. These are really just prompts in case y'all aren't very talkative. But it's really looking at what's working well, what should not change, what's not working. Are there existing development standards that are maybe too restrictive? Are there some that are not quite getting there? Is there things that you think we're going to hear from the development community that might cause them hesitation about this process? And then one of my favorites is, what are those projects that you've seen that have gone really well? You like the results in them. Or projects that maybe didn't go quite as well, that you can see a few ways to improve. And that can expand not just within Kyle. You can think about things you've seen elsewhere that you would like to see pulled in to your development environment here. So with that, I'd like to turn the keys over to y'all and take the conversation wherever it leads, if that's all right.
Had to turn my mic on. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think we're all excited for the opportunity to participate in this rewrite, and yeah, thank you very much for being here. Hopefully we can give you some things to chew on, and yeah. So does anyone have any initial thoughts out of the gate?
Might we follow the
Do you want to follow the
prompts on the
questionnaire?
page? Yeah, just to give us
Okay.
some general guidance, and we're not shotgunning this whole thing.
Anyone have thoughts on the first item, specific issues that routinely arise?
I mean, one of the things that I've seen, just in my time being here, is probably the conflict with the I-35 development standards. There's obviously a standard, and it seems to be the challenge is meeting the masonry requirement. And there's been circumstances that it's presented to us, and it doesn't meet that standard, and there's some type of variance or recommendations being made. I think we've chatted about it up here before. So I think the challenge or the, is if the standard is, if there's a standard, it should be met. I don't think it's necessarily difficult. It's just why are people not producing the work to the level of standard that's being asked? I don't know where the gap is there.
All right.
One of the things that is frustrating with this issue is the fact that, number one, developers act as if they've never seen the code related to the I-35 overlay, act surprised, and then want to work around it somehow because their models don't fit what we're asking. That's the big issue there. We go around and around about. When twice, with different businesses asking to come to town, I have seen them build to another town's zoning specs. There's something that brings about a great deal of cynicism about people coming before us in that kind of case. Specifically, the same businesses. 2 times I've seen that. And in fact, one of them was about masonry. And they had the front of the building and around the entire entrance was virtually completely stone. A good 30-foot run at least of stone. And so you feel like you're being played, quite frankly. And one time recently, we're almost trying to solve this problem from the dais. It's like, okay, you brought us that and you can't do this. We're like bargaining. And that process is not appropriate in my view. They need to come prepared to do business with the city of Kyle based on what the code says and not give us a cookie cutter design, which is what we're getting.
I'll second the concern that I think we've had more than one time ignorance is an excuse for an exception, and it's not a good one. One of the things that has come up, I think twice since I've been on this commission though, that I do think might be revisited is the garage door requirement at the rear of the, I got a couple of smiles up here. We approve the exception every time that there seems to be a decent reason to approve the exception to not have glass on the garage doors. I think in thinking through all of the buildings on that corridor that have been built in the last 5 years, I can't picture one that has glass on those doors. It seems that, and especially if it's in the back of the building, it seems that it wasn't a particularly practical requirement. I don't know if changing the I-35 overlay is something that's within our purview or within the purview of this review, but that seems to be one that comes up all the time that doesn't seem to work well.
And what the code says, though, if I'm remembering well, is that we want a front-facing experience out on I-35. So you're looking at front doors. You're not looking at back doors or blank walls or garage doors. So that becomes the issue of the garage doors. And I think that the nose of the camel gets under the tent wall is the particular issue there, because if it's garage doors, then what else are they asking? And actually, frequently, beyond garage doors, they ask a lot, in my experience.
When you say they ask a lot, are you saying the developers do? Or?
Yes,
oh,
yes,
okay.
yes, yes.
Okay.
They just natively, with their plans, put a burden on us to somehow resolve it.
That's good. Other thoughts?
So I hate to be the stick in the mud about this one, but I think the question was more about what works well. And the fact that we got you know, a bunch of negative comments about it right off the bat kind of speaks to what works
Yeah.
well, right? I think that kind of speaks for itself, right?
It's always easier to start there.
I agree. I agree with that. But like the first question, trying to be positive and start this whole thing off, right?
Well, the
You know,
first question, sorry to interrupt you, I just want to keep us on track. The first question was what specific issues that are there that
was getting there.
routinely arise? So talking about issues is inherently going to be somewhat negative. But,
My bad.
okay. But we will get to what's been going well, and I look forward to hearing your comments and everyone's comments at that one. I've done that before. Have you noticed any issues?
I've been here long enough to really point any out specifically, so.
Okay.
I just agree with the ones that have been pointed out.
Yeah. I-35 overlay was one that came onto my list. And then I also have noticed that we're getting things in that have been in motion for a long time. And it might not, I say might, it doesn't align with the comprehensive plan that we currently have. So we have things that are not sunsetting after a certain amount of time. And if there's a way that we can address that through code, to help the city develop in a way that matches our current vision and not the vision from 10, 20 years ago, maybe longer, I think that would be helpful for some of the issues we're trying to tackle.
Especially when it comes around to plan unit developments, as we'll be getting to at the end. I think that's a big concern for us, but I agree with you.
Any other issues that we want to raise right now? Okay, let's keep moving. Specific thoughts or concerns about how the city might develop in the future? That's a good question.
So, oh, go ahead.
No.
I stole your second. You can have this
Okay.
one.
I think my concern, it's mostly about residential, the residential aspect. My concern is that everything's starting to look the same. All the homes, all the subdivisions, everyone's building the same thing. Certain builders have multiple developments in here. Now, I'm not saying you can control that, but everything's looking the same. There's really not a whole lot of character being developed in most of the new subdivisions, and I get it, it's probably from an affordability standpoint to provide more affordable housing. But in a couple years, I think it's just gonna look pretty bland. That's what I observe the most, because I'm in the residential field, so that's what catches my eye most often.
I think to maybe piggyback on that and add to it a little bit, one of the things I see a very limited amount of diversity in our residential inventory right now, right? You're either single family or you're in an apartment. I think we have a lot of single family residential in the, or homes in the pipeline, whether they've come before us and they're starting the development process, or the development agreement's been signed but they haven't started yet. I think that creates a lot of water issues. I mean, I think water is a big thing we're dealing with right now. Single family residential uses quite a bit of it. It definitely doesn't help with density. And so I think some variation in our housing inventory would be really helpful. And that might speak to your everything looks the same. If we have a little bit of variation there, I think it helps the water issue. I think it helps the look and feel issue. I think some extra density and building on top of some of the infrastructure we've already developed, instead of kind of that sprawl where we have to continue building new infrastructure out, makes, is an easier burden on the city going forward. So I think that would be a big priority of mine.
So I think the other side of that too is most of the businesses I've seen go up or come before us have been along I-35, which means that they're not being built downtown. They're not being built in any kind of city center anywhere near it, right? So you're having to get on the highway, drive down, get stuck in traffic, sit and wait, it'd be nicer to have some more places pop up around town that were easier to get to without having to hop in the car. We're trying to push for the 5 network, for multimodal, like you said earlier, and yet we still keep approving businesses along I-35, which defeats the whole purpose.
So kind of what you're saying is bringing that into other areas of the city, either downtown revitalization or creating additional centers. Okay.
Which is probably why a lot of our concerns started with the I-35, because that's what everything is coming
Yeah.
forth is along the I-35. There's not a whole lot going on outside. I don't know that's a development code, though. That's a purchaser, developer's choice of location, realistically.
Well, sure, but there has to be a way to use the code to make it easier for them to develop in other areas, right? I mean, stands to reason we could make it easier in some way.
And that's where like a question that we have for y'all as stakeholders actually leads to a question we want to ask others. This is why we start with the commission, because then we know we can go talk to a commercial developer and just ask the question, why not? Why aren't you doing this? And maybe there's a path to that via the code, maybe there's not, but we can at least ask the question.
I think this, of course, is about the missing middle, the townhomes and apartment gardens and all the rest. And two things seem to be at issue here. And one of them is, of course, profit and what you get more profit out of. So what's the incentive around that? And then the fact that the financing is sometimes lacking for some of these missing middle and, say, mixed use, especially if it's really integrated commercial and apartments. I don't know how we incentivize, give them other incentives to build out the missing middle with these issues. So any part of the discussion that you can get going with others would be much appreciated.
Sure.
You know, one of the things I think has worked well to address that, because to your point, I think it's hard to incentivize that. I wish I could remember the name of the development that we looked at about 2 months ago, just on the east side. I think it's between the right up against Goforth Road. But it has single-family residential, it has multifamily, it has retail, it has park space. They did a really good job of combining all of that into one really neat area. And so we did something right there. So I think that worked really well. To the first question on your slide, what has worked really well? I think that was a great example of some kind of diversity in the housing inventory.
That was the development in Heidenreich?
I was going to ask if you know what subdivision.
I think we're talking about, the Grove or Project Sahara. Is that what you're talking about?
At Heidenreich and 150?
Yep. That was it.
Okay.
Any other thoughts about the future, how we'll develop? Okay. So the comments that I had jotted down echoed a lot of what they're saying about the oversaturation of certain types of housing. I think that limits Kyle. It kind of pigeonholes us into being a community for certain types of people at certain income levels at certain stages of life. And I think it would be kind of sad to make Kyle a place where it's harder perhaps to age in place in the community. Just because you live in a house with a yard and all that stuff when you are raising your kids here doesn't mean that that's what you need when you're 60, 70, 80 years old. So that's something that's important to me and him, apparently. Another thing that's important to me, I'm not sure how to address it via the code, but about the development of the city is we're going really fast. And one thing that we've learned in our comprehensive plan is about like the maintenance responsibilities that we have. Making sure that the developments that we have are going to generate enough, taxable base for the city in order to cover the cost of their ongoing maintenance. Because we want to be a city that's affordable, but also one that is maintained to a good standard. So I think that's going to be a challenge because we're growing a lot right now, and we might not have a clear picture of what that cost is going to be. But at least in the future, maybe we can make more informed decisions. Yeah, like the fiscal impact section of the presentations we get, they say, oh, there's no fiscal impact. I'm like, well, there's no fiscal impact today, but 8 years from now, 10 years from now, there will be. But there's not really a mechanism right now for the city to provide us with that information or even determine it themselves.
May I on that point? Because I actually made a note on this, on fiscal impact. It's actually in our comp plan that we should, quote, conduct fiscal analysis on development projects and incorporate the results into development recommendations and discussions. I'm not promoting anything, but if you remember talking to me, some of you, you know that I've gone to some of the demonstrations by a company called ESRI. That's the only one I know that does the GIS. But they have one product called Urban, where you can do a fiscal analysis and really get a good visual and good information from that particular software. And I think it would be something of real benefit to us in doing a fiscal analysis. It's the best I've seen in my experience. And also the value of it is you can literally visualize. You could take somebody totally naive to the things we're talking about and sit them down and show them pictures of what you're talking about and graphs built off of sites demonstrating fiscal impact. And I think that this would be, for instance, something coming to us as P&Z Commission. You know, if you gave us that visual on the overheads and let us see what we're really looking at and how this community is developing in a fiscally responsible way, that would make a difference in my view. So, and this is in our comp plan. So.
And so you're describing two pieces to this then. It's creating a development environment that results in high fiscal performance that can support ongoing M&O. It's basic sustainability. And then it's looking for ways to memorialize a tool that can help you understand if it's indeed accomplishing that.
Right.
Makes sense.
Before a foundation is laid, you know if this is going to work.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the future?
I think so. I think I have a thought.
Okay, share it, please.
How do we, my question is, how do we develop a downtown? Because that's probably the thing I hear the most from people in the community is that we don't have a downtown. People talk a lot about Wimberley or San Marcos or even Buda, but Kyle does not really have a downtown that attracts people on a regular basis to really do anything unless there's kind of a little pop-up going on over here in the park. So I don't know. I mean, that would be something when we're talking about the future. It would be nice to have some sort of entertainment or reason to come downtown on a regular basis. I can't really think of one right now.
Are these meetings not enough for you?
Well,
no?
Yeah, but we can't drink at these meetings. You know?
Sorry.
So
Okay.
my thought of response to that is we might digress a little, but the note I'd made to myself about, you know, are there specific issues, how might this develop in the future, is that this was cow and cotton land. We had that station out there that loaded cotton to market. We had a little bit of a downtown, and the rest of it was cows and cotton. And so I would say even at this point, not being cynical about the past, but we've got sort of a blank slate. I mean, we've got legacy stuff we're working with, and some of it's a burden for sure, but we've got a blank slate. But that's important. That's an important responsibility that we actually build out in a way that's sensible and sustainable for sure. But we also recognize that as we've been saddled with the legacy of other P&Zs and councils, we don't want to saddle the future with some, you know, glib, careless work, as has been done previously, in my view.
I do think that some of the issues downtown are a bit outside of, and I think when we get issues that come in front of us, you're right, we can do a better job of making sure they're up to a certain standard. But I think some of the issues that prevent downtown from being truly vibrant are a little out of the control of, you know, of P&Z. I mean, there's nowhere to park for one. How do you get a business that draws a lot of people down here if there's nowhere for them to park? You know, I think, so it's a chicken and the egg thing, and I think we can do the best we can, but I think that there's some other issues that might not be under our control.
Well, I think that parking argument emphasizes the need for multimodal, right? If anywhere you live in Kyle, you have a way to get somewhere without driving, then you don't have to worry about parking. right? Building a downtown that's sustainable, you don't necessarily need to fill it with parking spots. That's a waste of land, right? When you can use that land to build up businesses in mixed-use areas. I think the emphasis should be on other forms of transport rather than the personal vehicle.
Any in particular that you're thinking about?
Bikes, buses, if we can afford it, you know,
Are you ready to move to the next question? Okay. Jay, I'm going to start with you. Which development regulations seem to work well?
Somebody's gonna have to remind me, what's that one behind the Veterans Park? All the water features and all that?
Verde?
Is that what that one is? It's got that mixed-use development back there. Yeah, I really like the way that one looks. It's so far away, though, that it's brick and mortar district. It's so far away, though, with no other connection points that if you can afford to live there, which is another problem, you can't, there's not really much to go outside of that, right? You can't, it's too far away, right? We need that more centralized rather than built, you know, outside of the main downtown area.
So you like the form of it, you might like to see it somewhere closer to other things and maybe
Correct.
try to find a path for it to be a little bit more affordable.
Yeah.
Go for it.
No, that was the one I had on my list too. I thought it was a really nice development. I think there's good use, different mix. There's not any single-family homes over there necessarily right in there. So I think it's multifamily, retail. You got the park there. I think it's a really nice development. Other developments that reflect high quality. I think Plum Creek's really nice. It's probably the most, wait, yeah. Oh, regulations. Is that what we're on?
E.
Oh, I skipped. I thought you said what's working well.
Well, number 3 starts with what's working well. But let's just continue the discussion. That's okay. We're into it now. We don't have to go in order. We can kind of popcorn around. It's all good. I should have not
It
said
helps,
anything.
part why we ask this question is then we'll look at those and kind of back our way into what regulations led to that. Or did you get lucky? That's the other thing we look at.
Development regulations that need to be improved. What I have seen is that one that really is aggravating to me, that housing developments are designating detention ponds as their green or open space with no, sometimes these are subdivisions with few amenities and limited access to public parkland. Following that, I think that the park funds that are charged to developers, park dedication funds, couldn't quote it off the top of my head, but I think they're too low for the needs of the community. So I feel like the green space is being neglected. Therefore, the most human aspect of being alive in this city is in the end that. If you look at the most successful thing this city has going in terms of park and recreation or any of the rest of it, you walk a block and a half, 2 blocks down to the park, and you see people there almost all of the time. And people need that kind of space. They desire it. They enjoy it. But we don't ask the developers to provide it. Now, I understand the financials there, so we don't have to talk about that. But still, to have a requirement that, okay, you're going to give us a detention pond for your green space, but the park dedication fees, you know, we want to ask something real of them.
Makes sense.
Are there regulations we like? So I'm going to say I like our signs when I drive along I-35, going back to I-35. I think that our city is less kind of cluttered looking than some of our companions around here. So I think we're doing a good job with our signage and keeping that tasteful. I also really like the dark sky rules. So keeping the lighting down instead of going up, and having that be tasteful instead of glaring in your, sky.
I agree. Dark skies is one of the underappreciated things. It's sort of like that silent quality. It's there, and you notice it if you know to look for it. But it's a really important feature of the community, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts on regulations that can be approved or improved other than what's been discussed?
Yeah, not sure if it's a regulation or code but I've noticed in several circumstances, I think it's a setback issue for residential. I've seen several developments or houses that, I mean, the driveways are so small you can't even park a Honda Civic inside of it. In several different areas, it just doesn't seem like that's appropriate. You know, for selling, if people are selling products to people, it's usually their most expensive asset they ever purchase. Should be able to fit your car in the driveway. So I think looking at setbacks and why there's circumstances that's happening. I don't understand that one.
I'm glad you brought that up, though. It reminded me of a couple more things that I do like about our, I guess, rules for houses. I believe we've got something now, correct me if I'm wrong, that says that the wall where the garage is has to be further back than the wall where the entrance is. I really like that. I don't like the snout-nosed houses where it's just like a garage door and then you have to walk around in order to get to the door. So I think we're doing that well. And we also have a unique rule about what the garage doors look like, if I remember correctly. They have to be some sort of color or painted or something. At least in my neighborhood, they're that color. And I think it looks, I guess, it looks nicer. So.
Rather than just plain white?
I mean, I grew up in a house with a white garage door, but my house had white trim, so it worked. It wasn't just slap the cheapest garage door on there and call it a day. It had aesthetics. And I know that this group is all about practicality, but I'm going to stump for aesthetics all the time, so.
Tree replacement fees. I once again, developers wouldn't like hearing this, but it's easy for them to write a check at the amounts we're charging them, I think, if they want to cut down some legacy trees or, you know, and I think that could be looked at, quite frankly. Also, in line with the theme here of the outdoors and ecology, it seems that we need to have the residential developments really be held to some standard on a lawn turf installation. A lot of the HOAs around here require at least 50% lawn turf. And in our water environment, that's impossible to sustain. Some HOAs actually, if you make an effort to alter your lawn, you've got to actually go through a process for approval by the HOA, and you can also get into trouble with them for not having gone through a process with them. So the homeowner doesn't have a choice, and they're left hanging there with this expensive lawn that's either dying or requiring too much water. And I think if the city could somehow convince the developers to do something else, that might be helpful.
When you say lawn turf, you're saying artificial?
No. People confuse that. The word turf means grass.
Okay.
Real grass. It's astroturf, and it's an invention, you know, but it's no, lawn turf is just your common Bermuda lawn or whatever you might have around here. Yeah.
And what's I didn't quite understand your issue with it.
Water usage.
Okay.
It's the biggest water waste that we have. Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of brings to your point, if we had neighborhoods that could actually implement xeriscaping and just look different, totally different from the norm, I think that would also stand out in Kyle.
One of the biggest thing, it's number one on my list, it's circled, underlined, and in bold, is that we should require new single-family residential developments to have xeriscaping from day one. Yes. Developers aren't going to like it. Sure, the builders aren't going to like it. Sure, it's not going to be as easy to sell that house as it is if there's one, 2 minutes away that has a lawn. But, I think we have to, every part of how the city works has to address the water issue, and I think that's how we can do it. I think, and I might be a little bit biased because up until 4 weeks ago, I was the president of my HOA. I see a lot of value in having that architectural review committee. When you see, or the standard you mentioned where it has to be reviewed when you make changes. If you see some of the proposed changes that come through, I think you would really be appreciative of that committee. But I do think that a lot of those architectural standards are set based on the declaration for that HOA when the developer, before anyone ever breaks ground when they write those. And so to be written to be more xeriscape friendly, to require less water, or to not require a certain amount of grass, things like that, I think would be really beneficial.
And it has to start at the beginning, is the point.
Right. Depending on where they put it, whether it's in the declaration or guideline or something like that, certain things can change and certain things can't. But if you establish that from day one.
With the covenant.
With the covenant and the declaration for the HOA, and not just day one for the resident, but for the builder. I think a lot of the pushback we get against xeriscaping in my HOA is, I don't want to go spend $5,000 on my yard. Fair. So if we start off requiring some form of, I don't know if it has to be all rock, it doesn't have to be all xeriscape, but some form of low water landscaping from day one. I don't know if you say you can't put irrigation systems in. I don't know if that would help. Spitballing, but definitely needs to start from the development agreement down.
Yeah, I don't know what influence we have exactly. I mean, this is why folks like you are working with the staff, right? But it's from Jump Street with the developer. You've got to be clear that you can't have a HOA as a legacy with this kind of covenant, and we're saddled with those water requirements for those homes. We wouldn't allow that kind of water wastage for any other home usage. I can't think of one. What else would you use? And we find that over 50%, a lot of times, to 70% of the water use in a home is turf.
Well, and a lot of the issues that you see with the watering too is over, my house is 24 years old. Over the last 24 years, the irrigation system that was installed, it shifts, it turns, it breaks, you name it. And so even the people that do water their lawns regularly, it's not particularly efficient. There's a rule that says you can only have so much that hits the pavement, but it's not enforced. So that could certainly be, irrigation systems could certainly be addressed up front as well.
Makes sense.
Improvement ideas. Okay. I do have a couple that I would like to be just considered. I obviously don't have all the answers, but it seems like we've had issues with parking in the city in the past where some places have way too much and some places don't have enough. And I think that, maybe we could explore the idea of letting businesses decide for themselves, because if they're wrong and they don't have enough parking spots, well, it's their loss out on customers. If the city is wrong, it means that someone is spending their money to install parking places that money could have instead been used to make a better looking building or to hire more people or something. So exploring how to get more flexibility with the parking requirements. And then my little pitch for outdoor things is I think sidewalks are difficult in this town because it is so hot for most of the year. I think it would be really cool to somehow get the sidewalk and the landscape rules to talk to each other to where there's shade, like from mature trees over sidewalks. Obviously, it won't work that way the day that they're installed, but to at least make sure that there's a specimen within a proximity of a sidewalk where when it's mature, you can expect to have shade coverage for X percentage of the year. I think that would go a long way towards making multimodal more feasible, because I live so close to here and I ride my bike here, and even then I'm hot. If I tried to walk here, it would be in an ambulance. So those are my two.
There's more or less a model for that here in town too, and that'd be Hometown Kyle. Has a lot of trees. And so when you're walking on the sidewalk, this would be your experience more likely, is that you experience the shade rather than being out frying in the heat. Yeah.
Okay. Final thoughts on that one, and then we can move to good development projects. I know everyone's excited for that one.
Good
Okay.
developments?
Good developments. So developments that reflect high-quality standards and make a positive contribution to the city, and why? I know we've already had one discussed of the brick and mortar.
I'll add that any of the developments that we've approved or that we have now that incorporate residential and commercial, I think are a big benefit to the city. We can point out specific ones, but especially if there's diversity in the type of residential and then commercial on top of it.
Pick one, it's awesome.
I think that Plum Creek, which is the historic backbone of the city in terms of development, succeeds with density oftentimes is one of the keys there. Now, it's infrastructure issues, trying to pave the streets there, I think is going to be a daunting task and expensive, but maybe other infrastructure issues too, but it's dense. And maybe we do want, in any given situation, more retail, for instance, and to have other amenities, but the density is what you see there in single-family residences.
So that's where we might want to look at it and kind of say like, okay, what went well about this? What would we improve if we had a do-over on that one?
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of like get it from an A- to an A+. It's like, still good.
Plum Creek was my other one on my list. I like it because of the reason he said, there's shops all around, retail all around, lots of parks, very walkable. It does have the mature trees now, but it's also, considerably older than everything that's newer. It's on a golf course, so maybe we could get another golf course. I'm just kidding. We're not getting another golf course, but.
Likely it uses recycled water.
So are there, the next question is about developments in other cities that set a high standard. What do they get right?
Mueller in Austin.
Yep.
Mueller and Austin's got it down to the T. They took their time with that. And I don't know, having an interaction with the city of Austin over that long a period and pulling that off was a miracle. Just for that reason alone. But easy to take care of the infrastructure over time. It's on a grid for the most part. The streets are smaller, so you don't have cars speeding, and they're easier to repave. You've got the higher density, a lot of retail, and it just works. I mean, when I go there to visit friends, it's like, oh yeah, this feels like somebody's hometown maybe,
Makes sense.
I don't have another development, but I think, I used to live in Houston for a long time, and I think Sugar Land, Texas, when it comes to where we talk about I-35, our corridor, when you drive through Sugar Land on the highway, you immediately know when you enter because they do a very good job enforcing their rules. I mean, I don't know that, it's a good thing, but every building looks the same. You definitely know you're in Sugar Land because they all are brick, they all look the same. Even the McDonald's looks the same. Maybe a little bit boring, but I think they do a good job enforcing what their standards are, and it doesn't seem like they make too many exceptions.
Fredericksburg, Bernie, and Kerrville are also really great examples of that, I think, that have some really uniform design standards and enforce them pretty strictly.
I'm going to make a plug for our neighbors up in Buda at the Buda Mill and Grain Company. I like going there when I have guest visits. So they preserved big old trees. They built around it. They have more meandering parking lots instead of big donuts around the building, so you can kind of walk from one place to another. I like that. The building exteriors have character, they're unique. The interiors have interesting layouts. It's not a bunch of things that are the same shape, just a rectangle, 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 rectangle. They've got some character there, which makes it seem like it's something that's, I guess, older, been there for a while, even though we know it hasn't. So, I like that one. And then I also love the Pearl Brewery area in San Antonio. Super walkable, great mix of things to do. It's an attractive destination from the morning all the way up to nightlife. So it's a really alive place. And those are my two.
That's a good one.
I don't know if I have an answer here, but just more for thought and discussion. I love the character of downtown Buda. I think that there might be a challenge with allowing character and also enforcing uniform standards. It worked out really well in Buda. Some people have great character, some people do not. And I think when how do you balance, like, we want character, but also only the good character, and let's keep things uniform? How is that something that, how do you work with that?
Welcome to what we do.
Okay.
That's what we always talk about in that space is risk management. The more you want to encourage, character and creativity, you do accept a certain level of risk with that. And that is a challenge that Buda had to deal with. John and I both came from actually working in Buda and implementing those codes. And that was one of the things we talked about is, hey, this could result in this, could be amazing. There's also a chance that you're going to have a few things that are going to get a little bit off. And if you're okay with that, then you can roll with it. If you're not okay with that, you need to try a different method. But you can definitely get to that where you can create good guardrails. And that, like one of the places that you sometimes think of is like the classic planning example of Seaside. Everybody thinks of the core of Seaside, where it's like, it looks very, very marine, on the beach. If you actually go back into Seaside, you can see how their development standards actually work, where they focus so heavily on form that you end up with a very diverse palette back behind that immediate square, where it's kind of the case of where it doesn't match, but it goes, if that makes sense, to kind of pull from like a fashion term. So that's probably what you're trying to get to is, it doesn't need to match, but it needs to go a little bit.
In that line, it's literally far from here, but Dunedin, Florida, if you ever want to look that up online, Dunedin, Florida is a pretty good representation of that. And integrating that kind of downtown with trails, actually. So I encourage anybody to go take a look at Dunedin.
Any other inspo ideas? Okay, let's keep moving so we're not here all night. Which types of development projects are not suitable for Kyle? Why are those projects unsuitable?
I struggled with this one.
It's tough.
I, on the other hand, immediately
did
had
not
two.
struggle.
I wasn't
You have
struggling
a
at
full
all.
list.
I wasn't struggling at all. No, there are two that come to mind, because when we think development, we're thinking about usual retail, commercial, and single family or something, maybe apartments. But no, there are two that, several of which we have now, and those are logistic parks or facilities. We've got 1 million square foot logistic facility out here on the southeast part of town, and that's fine. But how many of those do we need? They don't bring jobs. They're literally transit point for goods. We used to call them warehouses. Now they're logistic parks or facilities. I think we've reached our max. We've got Amazon and several others, plus the big 1 million square foot one out southeast. And I think most of us know some of the history about that. The other thing is that San Marcos was facing, I think they voted it down, was a data center. Because we're on this corridor here, the innovation corridor, what we're calling it today, there would be a tendency to want to bring in data centers. And I think that they don't bring jobs, they don't bring anything attractive to a community, they take a lot of the PEC power. So I'm not sure we want something like that here either.
Take it from me as an IT professional, they really don't bring that many jobs. There's
Yeah,
maybe 4 people in one of them
Yeah, 4
buildings.
people,
Like,
right? One of them's a cooling technician or something.
They employ a lot of HVAC. So you kind of mentioned data centers and logistics. Do you kind of have this feeling that like light industrial broadly is feeling oversaturated, or is it kind of these like specific areas of that light industrial warehousing space?
even if it's not oversaturated already, personally speaking, I don't want to see it become a Deer Park, a Pasadena, a LaPorte. That's my hometown. I grew up there, and that is not the kind of place that I want to live in ever again. Like,
And since we're off into this, and it's not really too tangential, is that in the code, I find it amazing that the secondary code designation for many forms of code, it would be like retail is first primary designation, and then secondarily it is warehouse. I think one of them, if I recall correctly, was shoes, women apparel, retail, warehouse. What? What? I mean, it's several levels that just brings some thoughts. So, but this seems to be the case that warehouses have in the code too much weight, in my opinion. It's just too easy to have a big W on a piece of property out there and go do whatever you wish with it. And I don't think it's the best, if you go by the standard of best use, oftentimes I don't think that's the best use in almost any circumstance in a town like Highland. I think it degrades the city, to be quite frank, in my opinion. And it needs to be looked at in the code. You know, we got a lot of W's in there. And as a note for the very end of my comments, but it has to do with both the comp plan and the zones, the district zoning, is we have at the end of our ETJ out there at 21 and FM 150, two parcels that were, one of them says it's ag, I'm forgetting which one, and one, I think the comp plan says in warehouse and industrial. We've got a little difference there as to what the zoning code says and what the comp plan says. Makes me think that it's attractive to somebody to want to make it warehouse and industrial. I see the East 150 as being the gateway to the east side of Kyle. It need not be cluttered up with warehouses or whatever else. That's our east side gate. It's a good place to put in commercial and retail in that area because San Marcos hasn't done it yet. It hasn't been in that area and done that yet. So if we get the jump and we have some good solid development there, commercial, retail, and then, you know, mixed use past that, I think we're doing something. But please look at the code and the comp plan on the maps and see what I'm talking about and see how that might be resolved, and that warehouse industrial near a major intersection might be avoided.
I hesitate to discourage, and I understand that those giant warehouses that have, 4 people and don't create a lot of jobs and are a bit of an eyesore are not great. I hesitate to discourage the light industrial businesses, especially because if, we talked earlier about fiscal impact and how do we make sure that we have a tax base that's paying for the maintenance and all the infrastructure that we're developing. Businesses do that a whole lot better than residents do. But I think there's 2 ends of the spectrum, right? And I wonder if a better solution is we need to make the fiscal impact a bigger part of our analysis and our discussions when we're doing planning and zoning work and permitting and approvals and things like that. And rather than saying, we'll take this business, we won't take that one, or we'll take this building, we won't take that one. And maybe we do it enough, I don't know, but maybe if it was a bigger piece of that decision or that review, that would address that concern.
It goes back to what I was first saying about the comp plan, saying that it should be a fiscal analysis on developments, So it'd be helpful to us to know. I mean, if we've got Michael Dell moving to a 2,000 square foot place and he's building his first computers, that's one thing. But to have that, a 10,000 foot, warehouse, I can't see that. I think we could be in a trap with warehouses, is my fear.
Shall we move forward? Good. Okay. General regulation questions. We've got 4 of them here. Do we want to go one by one through the questions or just kind of throw all of our ideas out? What would be easier for y'all, to keep it organized, one kind of topic at a
We
time?
can sort it either way.
Okay.
I defer to y'all. Take it wherever you want to take it, however y'all work best. Our job is to decipher it, so
Okay.
we'll be fine.
I have to say that in terms of poorly written and confusing regulations and so forth, some of these other items as well, really comes down to staff and the city attorney and other staff members, and they would know better what is poorly written or confusing. I've sometimes seen that process here and then going to council as well and to other city meetings. And I have to say at this point that staff does a very good job of somehow sorting that out.
Microphone. There we go. Your microphone is off. I want to make sure they hear you.
Yeah, staff, yeah, really. Staff does a very good job of sorting these things out. I know that sometimes they're under tremendous pressure by people trying to work with the rules in a certain way, and I think that they have a way of working with us and developers that is admirable as far as I've seen over the time I've been here. So if people are confused or struggling with the confusion, it's them. I think by the time it gets to us, the staff pretty much outlines to us, where the wrinkles are and what our choices might be in a given situation. So I don't think we suffer that too much, at least in my experience.
I second that. I think all the things that are in the weeds kind of get ironed out before it comes to us with the staff, and we're kind of presented it on a golden platter for the most part. I think so.
Yeah, I struggled with this question because we don't really see that side of things. I know what happens for me when I'm looking through the code, trying to prepare for a meeting. I might be confused or not be able to find something, but I'm just a lay person. I'm not a professional. So I think this would be a great question for staff, for the developer community. They could probably give you good insight. Anyone want to?
I don't have anything further on this topic.
On 8, I would just say that are some of the regulations excessive, for instance, and onerous for developers? In a cynical moment, I would say I think they all are too onerous for developers. I think they're balanced, actually, in my experience, fairly well balanced. Are some not strict enough? We've already talked about some of them. I think a lot to do with the greenery in this city and the amenities. I think that we're not strict enough. And I don't think it's a burden, in my view, to ask more.
Yeah, I'll second this. On this one, I had landscaping and water usage and being a consideration. I don't think it's too onerous, and I don't think it's a problem even if it is. I don't think we were appointed to make developers' lives easier, and so if it's difficult, that's okay if it produces a better end result. So landscaping and water usage would be my big 2.
Better than having your water meter turned off,
Fair enough.
Onerous things, anybody? Okay, I'll throw one out there. I've taken, I don't know, a few soapbox stands in the past about architectural features being required on blank walls. I do think it's nice to not have buildings that are really plain and boring, but also sometimes those architectural features are just like dumb and they don't make sense. I go on and on about awnings over nothing just because they need some sort of thing on the wall. So if we could think about ways to make that smarter, have it be stuff that makes sense, I think that would be good. Because I'm sure as a as a developer, it would be really annoying to have to like spend the money on something that's not doing anything. If you have a beautiful stone wall or brick wall, why change it? Like, maybe we can incentivize that way. If you do good materials or something, you can be exempt from the unnecessary decor on your building.
Building decor.
Well, I think brick buildings, like plain brick buildings, can be really pretty.
Yeah, the landscape equivalent to that term, we would call it shrubbing it up, where you just plant a bunch of shrubs and call it good.
Yeah.
And it's that same kind of
How
thought
can we make the
process.
buildings good without shrubbing them up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, there's a line here, because I just was traveling in several places, and they have older buildings that have been repurposed many times, which is really desirable. And the features exist, in New Mexico, and some of the materials were made in St. Louis, the architectural features. And they were preserved over this period of time. And I think that some of these features are quite attractive over time, maybe not certainly awnings. But I think that actually, to some degree, in the overlay, I-35 overlay, the suggestions we make aren't bad ones. As to, there's a menu you can choose from. It's not like we're limiting them. But I agree that a lot of times they will do something like that. So I would take a look at the comp plan or the overlay zoning and see if there's enough choice there for them that's reasonable, maybe, is one way of looking at that.
Makes sense.
One other thought, which I might get flack for. I don't know if this is happening in Kyle, but in some of the urban areas I've been to, you see a lot of apartment buildings. They all have the same kind of posture and stance. Mid-rise buildings, really weird, like bump outs and blocky things and random changes in material from here to there. And they're everywhere. And so I think that is not something that's going to age very well. I don't think it's going to look good in 100 years. I don't think it looks good today. So if we could find a way to maybe tighten our code to prevent those sorts of things from filling up blocks of our city, I think that would be
I'll
great.
back you up on that. I mean, the one that stands out to me is the one they built right next to the Yellow store in San Marcos. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
That thing is hideous. I don't want that here. Like,
We're going to get in trouble. No, just kidding. We can't get in trouble for saying that, can we? I'm looking at
What are they
legal
gonna do
over
about
there.
We can't
it's a personal opinion.
For saying you don't like something because it's your personal opinion, yeah, you're probably fine. For trying to write in the code whether or not it's legal is a different question.
Okay. Okay. We'll let y'all figure out that line.
Can the city say, when someone presents something like that, can you just say, we don't like this? We don't want this. Redesign it? Does it have to be written in the code? Can you just say like, we don't really like the way this building looks here? Or can we say that?
So, not really, no.
You can say whatever you want to a certain degree. I mean, your votes should be based on the code.
The code.
Yeah.
So I would say, as well as potentially your constructive criticism should be supporting the code too.
All right, so let me put it this
but,
way then.
yeah,
So
I
if the
mean-
code is, we want brick and stone, right? We want to have a uniform look to our town, oriented around masonry and brickwork, right? And that kind of rules that out, right?
Well, the state of Texas prevents us from doing
That's what I was
that.
about to mention, is that you have to be careful about how you approach some of these things too, because you do have an active legislative body about 50 miles to your north. So that's something you have to keep in mind, because your regulatory stuff can change. But what we might be looking at is ways to incentivize pathways to what you want. Dangle the carrot, so to speak. But getting to the question of like, do we like this, do we not? It kind of sometimes depends on what type of process you're in and the level of discretion that you're afforded. If somebody is coming in with a planned development district, then they are asking for basically a shift in exchange on things. Door tends to be wide open in that space. If it's a variance case, you're treading dangerously if you start being like, well, we just don't like it. So that's what you have to kind of think about it in those terms. But you also have to think about it from the perspective of the developer. They want a level of certainty as well. It's a hard thing to design when you don't know what you're designing to. But in most cases, your city staff is usually doing you a solid in the background of, hey, you're about to bring this forward. We've seen a few things. We're not going to tell you not to present this, but we are going to caution you that you might want to think about X, Y, and Z. And sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't.
Should we move to question 9? Question 9. I actually don't have thoughts on this one. I think you'd have to ask staff for the applicant. I don't see that side of things.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's probably more geared towards staff, but I will say like sometimes we do have things that come back, right, that were grandfathered. And obviously that's kind of out of our control, but that would probably be the only thing that might be an issue. Something that was approved years ago and it's coming out of the woodwork and maybe might not be compliant anymore. But yeah, this is definitely more directed towards staff, I would say.
Shall we move to 10? 10, okay. What could be done to increase the efficiency of the development process? I have an idea.
All right.
So I've heard of some cities where they have, I guess, certain building plans for different types of housing, like desired housing that they want to incentivize. And it's basically like cleared to go by the city. So if you want to build this thing, you have a much more efficient, smooth path towards getting that approved. So your timeline will be quicker. I don't know if there's other benefits that cities do for it. I feel like time is a very important thing in development. Time is money. So having a pre-approved short list of certain missing middle types of housing or the few over live work sort of buildings that we don't see a lot of, if the city can kind of hand that to people in the code and say, these are things we want to see, and if you build it just like this, we're going to make it easy for you to do that. I think that would help the efficiency.
For my education, and perhaps it's valuable to the conversation, I'd like to ask the city attorney about something like that, actually, if I may. If you present a menu of, structures, and these are preferred structures to developers, is that an imposition or legally on their rights as property owners?
Preferred versus required?
Yeah, preferred building types, and you say you will get an easier pass if you work with our models.
I think it could be complicated. Typically, what I've seen is the best way to get development standards in is through some sort of incentive program, either through allowing them, PUD, or through an economic development type incentive program where you're providing some sort of funding to the developer. If that's the best way to get something that you want without rubbing against legislation issues.
The pre-approved plan method, what I see that used the most for is if you're trying to reduce barriers to creating like an ecosystem of small developers, where it's somebody that's never done something before in their life, but they want to try their hand at it by building an accessory dwelling in their backyard, for example. That's a really common approach that you do see with a pre-approved plan. It's not required. They can go get something designed all on their own. It's just like, hey, this is here if you want it. We already know it complies, so it's an easy path. You can also design one, whatever you want to do, up to you. We have seen that. Bryan, Texas does that with their Midtown area.
That was my only idea. Anyone else? Okay, let's jump to zoning regulation questions. Are there any issues with the planned unit development PUD process? If so, what issues exist?
I'll jump on that one really quickly, and that is zombie PUD. Okay? But before I get to that, mixed-use development under our code for planned unit development district shall include and allow for compatible mixed uses such as compatible residential, commercial, and/or industrial within a single project. This language kind of jumps out to me, you know. Compatible residential and commercial, I get. Industrial, I know scantly, a little bit, that industrial can mean different things under Texas law, unfortunately. But I see that word and it means one particular thing. It can mean what else? It can mean recreational facilities or...
Sure. Usually what we think about in a mixed-use environment is matters of scale. That's a key thing that we think about, and the type of industrial activity. Is it artisan scale? Is it, you know, what size is it? The classic example is the microbrewery, nano brewery, or a brew pub. That's kind of your classic example where it does have an industrial component to it. But it's about creating performance standards for what is okay in that type of environment and what isn't. You know, if you don't want something where you're probably having to do really heavy industrial pretreatment for your wastewater discharge. That's probably a good clue that that's probably not the best thing to have in a mixed-use building. You don't want something that would qualify as a high hazard occupancy under your building codes, for example. You know, sometimes things that people don't think about in that space might be like furniture makers. You think, oh, that would be perfectly fine on the bottom floor, until you recognize that sawdust is one of the most flammable things out there. And managing sawdust is incredibly difficult. So that's what you have to kind of think about with your performance pathways and that. But there can be a place for it. I do sometimes provide book recommendations. There's a great book called Recast City by Ilana Prus that talks a lot about how do you occupy mixed spaces with very small scale manufacturing.
I have one other thing with plan unit development, and that is they don't seem to really have an expiration date except under very explicit terms of failing, you know, in terms of infrastructure outlay by the city, and then they can force an expiration of the PUD. But what I'm concerned about is, key example is that one from 2011 we saw last year. It became a wholesale warehouse, okay? Now, nobody's going to come to us today with that kind of plan and ask for a PUD. That's not happening. That was from 2011. This is what I mean about legacy kinds of situations. So we were stuck with that. And it dawned on me in looking around that there's not really, other than these two examples, an expiration date for PUD. So you can grant somebody a PUD, and it's there. I've seen them since I've been on here, 2.5 years. Somebody was given a plan unit development designation, has done nothing. And there's more than one of those. And cynic that I am, because I can't say I've read up on this exactly, but you know, that creates value to have a plan unit development, and it sure makes it attractive to flip or pass through over time, like probably happens since from 2011 to 2024. That just is not acceptable in my view. I think that I would like to see written into the code something about an expiration for planned unit developments, that if they do not meet certain development criteria, either by phase or just in terms of starts. And the example I would use is conditional use permits. It's a year. You got a year to pull this together. You say you got it together, do it. And we had an example tonight of where somebody had to come back and ask for a CUP because they couldn't get it off the ground. I think that would be the same thing. It's absolutely fair for a parcel that's been given a planned unit development designation. And so that's something very much I would like to see, because if you look at our maps and look at the way people think, we're quick to give planned unit development status to something. And I think that's something can really saddle us over time. It's great for the people who are getting fewer restrictions and get the benefit to be creative, but look how they're being creative is the point I would make. It's not in a way that's to our benefit.
Getting the results you want.
Yeah, the kind of results we want.
So you're kind of talking about getting the results you want out of a PUD type process, but also thinking about what I'll call like kind of speculative entitlement as a broader term, and how can you appropriately create guardrails to that within the bounds of state law. 'Cause that's the other thing you have to work with a lot in this space is
Vested
you're
interests and so
trotting into the
forth.
vesting space where it gets very delicate.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But any way we can get at that would be helpful, I would think, you know?
So a thought that just came to my mind, and I haven't been back to look at the ordinances about PUDs and how that works, but if I remember correctly, we have one meeting about it. There's a public hearing because it's a change of zoning, and then we're expected to take the vote, right? I think it might be interesting to do multiple readings of that, because some of those documents are quite lengthy. And if we get it on Friday afternoon and on Tuesday, we're expected to vote on 40 pages of PUD language, that's quite onerous on us, and it's also quite hard for the public to really be informed and to come and share their opinion on those. So that's one for
You're just
consideration.
kind of slow it down and work a little bit more deliberately to understand what's being asked.
Yeah, but for us, but the public to have, they don't have the information we have, and they would be interested in tracking this, I would think over time. So, yeah, I agree with that, absolutely.
Ready for the next question? Okay. If any current zoning districts need to be addressed, which ones? Okay, I'll bite. Single-family subdivisions, our comp plan says that we're not supposed to do those, but we do have a lot of those districts or zones, whatever they're called. But they limit the commercial activity. You can have like churches or schools or things like that, but we are moving away from the zoning, strict zoning, to more of these place types. So most of Kyle is going to be under this traditional neighborhood place type, which calls for the mixing of uses. So I think our single-family subdivisions, and this taps also on your question about the permitted uses for each district. If we're going to keep the single-family and the townhome districts, all of those, I think we need to modify them to allow for the mixing of uses that's called for under the comp plan.
So you're talking about willingness to modify current zoning districts to broaden their, the types of things that can happen.
Yes, or blow them up.
Yeah. All right.
And just as to bring it back around to something I made earlier, it's this issue about FM 150 and 21 out there, and the zoning and the comp plan. A couple of things. We've got the FM 150 overlay goes to the city limit, which is hardly near 21. But I think that I would encourage the city to move that overlay anytime they hopscotch that city limit, to move that overlay, I mean quickly, so that they have that in place in regarding zoning. And again, once we get out to 150 and 21, we've got that issue there with warehouse and industrial. And that's the east side, that's the gateway to, the east gateway to Kyle and Viva. I think we need to pay attention to it.
I don't know where the right place to put this is, but I think it's right after your comment. So I had this written down as it pertains to East Kyle, because I've noticed, as difficult as sometimes it is for people, we have that I-35 overlay district, and it's worked really well because you see the result as you drive down I-35, and the buildings look nice and the properties look well maintained. We have similar design standards for downtown. Individual neighborhoods might have them. I've noticed that we lack some of those standards in parts of East Kyle. There has been a lot of commentary over the last few years from the community about equity in the types of businesses and the types of housing and things like that that go in East Kyle. And I think there's a lot of, whether it's landowners or developers or businesses or the city a bunch of penguins sitting on the iceberg waiting to jump in, someone's got to go first. And I think it would be really beneficial for that side of town if we implemented some design standards that brought new buildings up to the standards that we see on I-35 and in some of the areas in West Kyle.
Sure.
I'm just curious, is there a difference right now in the standards? Or like, just the businesses that are being chosen to put in over there? Because I do agree with your comment. I'm just wondering why that is today.
The overlay standards, right now we have several in the zoning code, but there's only one that actually has standards in them. I wasn't here when they were going on, but the state enacted some language a couple years back that kind of was working to prohibit kind of styles and architectural review unless they were in specific overlay districts that were deemed necessary, culturally important, viable. So I think the city created those in anticipation, but I don't think was able to fully vet out the additional standards, because obviously I-35 overlay standards aren't gonna fly down Center Street and Bunton Creek. So that's definitely something we'll look at in those areas.
And, you know, to your point, there might be some other reasons why we can't do that. But I know that Dollar General that we voted to approve 2 months ago would never be on I-35. So I think there's definitely a difference in the design standards between the two.
And what you might hang your hat on, without going too far afield with this, is this idea of culture. And, you know, both the culture of Kyle, the culture of people who've lived in that vicinity. I mean, we just have to be honest about this. The roundabouts we're building are supposed to be reflective of Kyle and its culture, its history. So I don't know why we wouldn't encourage development per se to be representative of our history and so forth and our peoples, you know? I know state law has gutted us largely on this, but still, any way we could get there is fine with me.
Other thoughts on current zoning districts? We can work on? Okay, what about ideas for new districts, additional districts?
As far as I reviewed, this is again a question that I'm not sure, I could listen to a conversation about it, but I don't think we know, frankly, about what a new district might be. But I would encourage this discussion, certainly with you and staff and council. And of course, our listening and putting in some input, I guess. But I think that's an issue with the town that's growing as fast as we are, to really take a look at that.
Makes sense.
So going back to the idea of blowing up current zoning districts, I think it could be interesting to explore the idea of a traditional neighborhood zoning district that incorporates ideas from the comprehensive plan. So things like smaller lots and mixed types of residences together. So maybe require, okay, if you have X number of acres in your property, you need to have a minimum of 2 different types of housing typologies. Or you need to have, like, if you're gonna have this many acres, you should have a commercial facility within a half mile of every single residential unit. We do that for parks right now. We say, okay, everybody has to be within a quarter of a mile of a green space. Why can't we do that for residential, for new residential? Because right now I feel like it's being concentrated along roadways, which makes sense, but if it's on a roadway and you live deep inside the neighborhood, you're probably gonna drive there, because let's be honest, you don't wanna walk. So what if it was, I don't know, more smattered throughout? I don't know.
Pocket parks and so forth?
No, not pocket parks, pocket coffee shops, pocket taco places, pocket, grocers. Like, how do we get a zoning district that sprinkles that in there, mixed throughout, where it's evenly spread out for people instead of just concentrated? The one we talked about earlier at Go Forth and, what was it called? 150 on the east side?
150.
Okay, well, we know what we're talking about. Project Sahara. Okay, so there's commercial right there at the entrance of the community, which is great. But if you live way back in the back. Yeah, so that would be an idea for maybe a new district, is something more intentionally sprinkled
That
through.
that can support like kind of the small neighborhood scale commercial interventions.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I interpreted from the comprehensive plan that we were trying to achieve with our traditional neighborhood place type.
All right.
I mean, I just feel like, I mean, I love that idea. I think it's a great idea. I just think when they're developing commercial spaces, they're focused on traffic count and visibility and how many people are coming through there. When it's located inside of a neighborhood, it's like that thing is dedicated to just whoever lives in that neighborhood, so it makes it financially challenging to
Yep.
operate a business like that. But if we could figure out how to do it, that'd be a great idea.
You know, I think in my observation over time is places that marginal land use, you know, the buildings just are sitting there. You can put in a coffee shop pretty easily and people will find it because it's different and it's near other, you know, homes. I just came from a place like this, got 3 used bookshops within a mile of each other, you know, and they sell books, they stay open. They've got their coffee houses. But it's all property that's kind of marginal. I mean, you can get into it cheap. And there's foot traffic.
Any other ideas for new districts? Okay. Any thoughts about how appropriate are the permitted uses for the districts that we have?
I've already heard one comment about the permitted use chart and the, is it retail or is it a warehouse or is it both?
Warehouse,
Which gets to the-
secondary for many things.
Yeah, we already have some thoughts on your use table.
Oh, boy. Okay. That's good.
That's the thought.
I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of been the thought.
Okay, so we'll keep moving. Are there any infill development issues?
Question for the newbies at the dais. Can somebody explain infill for me, please?
Oh, yeah. So your infill might be like, explain infill, you have to explain the opposite, which is greenfield. So greenfield is like a property that's never been developed. Usually it's a larger property, you know, 10, 20 acres, something like that or more. Your infill might be something here in downtown, where there's an empty residential lot and, you know, maybe there's a house on it 50 years ago and it's gone. That's where you have somebody that's asking like, hey, can I do something else here? Or it's a lot downtown that maybe at one point had a house, but they say, hey, can I put a little mixed use building on it? Where you're kind of dealing with existing lots, existing infrastructure, existing streets, stuff like that. That's usually you're in an infill scenario for that. Sometimes presents different challenges, especially if your code is kind of written for new development versus redevelopment.
Appreciate that, thanks.
I don't know specifically how this might be done, but in code to incentivize infill. Because we've got some people that actually have gone down Burleson Road, and probably 3 places I know of that have built homes down there and sold them and on empty lots. And we got some things that need to be torn down as well, but there's space there. So I think incentivizing that somehow would be a good look here.
That was exactly the comment that I jotted down, was how do we use the code to incentivize that? So we don't have an adopted downtown master plan right now. I know y'all are looking at that. If it's the version that I think it is, I think you should go back and watch the P&Z meeting from November 2002, I think is when, like right when we got on the commission, that was one of the first things we looked at. And there's plenty of material there for you to look at. But since we don't have the master plan, maybe that's what's slowing it down, but I don't know. There's got to be something that's causing the inertia around here.
Sure.
That's not very helpful to you, though.
Well, I mean, to your point, how does the city incentivize someone to do something with the property that the city does not own? Like, how does that work? How's there an incentive there?
Economic development incentives most frequently. So, for example, the downtown is in a tax increment reinvestment zone recently created. So the idea behind a TERS is that you take an area that's not developing on its own and you either apply the funding to infrastructure to help it develop it so that it's cheaper for a new developer to come in because we've added the water lines or the wastewater lines or the streets. Or you provide some sort of incentive to the developer directly so that when they're building it, they get to recoup some of those costs for developing those pieces of infrastructure that might otherwise not have been affordable.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are a ton of things that happen outside the development code. A great example is Waco, and they're outside of their development regulations completely. Their impact fees that they adopted, they broke down their impact fees by districts with analysis to back it, and their downtown does not have a water or wastewater impact fee. Now, it's justified because they looked at it and said, well, there's no improvements that are going to be needed in this area. The needs are further out, things like that. So you can look at your other tools like that, but you can also look at bonus incentives and things like that that you can bake into the development regulations. If you're working with an infill lot, maybe you're getting a density bonus of what you're allowed to do, recognizing that it's infill, it's a little more challenging. Things like that that can help those things. It's actually a really good opportunity to talk to some of the people that have done infill work in your downtown area or elsewhere to find out hey, what made this work for you? What would have actually made it work better? And if you can get to that answer, that can usually tell you, okay, is there something we can do in code that might help? That answer might be no, but we can at least investigate that. And worst case scenario is you get a cutting room floor recommendation out of your diagnostic report that says, hey, you might also want to look at this.
So I think, and again, forgive me, I'm a little inexperienced at this, but out in LaPorte, they have their main street that used to be pretty much nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure they did something very similar to that. But now it's all, not resale shops, but antique shops, coffee shops, restaurants and stuff like that. It's really nice to be around, right? They've got an open air beer garden, people can hang out. It's got park space and everything like that. I think it might be a good place to look for, maybe recommendations for how they did it.
Are we ready to outfill from the infill? Okay, subdivision questions. These are our last two, y'all. Thanks for your patience tonight.
I'm impressed at how y'all have stuck with this. This was impressive.
She's a pusher.
Oh, I'm a pusher, Katie. Have there been issues with plat approval that we are aware of? I'm not aware of any.
Nothing we can do anything about. I think a long time ago, there were some issues with street width around townhomes, but it's already set. 20 feet in some cases, that's pretty small in front of townhomes.
Yeah, I feel like most of the stuff that crosses our plate is pretty much been approved, so.
Okay, last question. How well have the roads and other infrastructure elements been installed? This is not stuff that the city has installed, but rather that other people have installed, correct? Okay.
Well, where I live, the last phase of the project, the road base failed in 3 sections and had to be totally redone, ground up. So sometimes developers are not paying attention to what the subs are doing, and you have that kind of result. Similarly, there was an issue with the developers. This is an interesting one. Tells us all to be cautious with drainage, and there was a really severe thunderstorm that went through and dumped about 5 inches of rain. This was 2019, I would think. And it washed down the hill of the development where houses were being built, and they didn't have adequate retention or filters in place. And it reached the street even, was running through people's backyards and threatened a person's home. And the developer actually got out of that because the site had been signed off on by the city engineer. And so the city had to go into the backyard of the lowest house and put in a drain in the backyard and tie that into the city stormwater system. And it was pretty actually dramatic for the person living there. I would have done something legally myself, but they ran with that. They said, no, it's your problem. You signed off on it. It's not ours.
We have a similar issue in Plum Creek. Most of the streets in Plum Creek are city streets, and those are fine. There's a section of Plum Creek that's gated, and those are private streets, and those were put in by the developer. It was actually the last phase of Plum Creek to go in. And there's already some pretty big structural issues with those streets and the pavement not holding up. And I think as you drive along those streets, if you look where the I forget the term, big metal. Manhole. Thank you. Manhole covers on there. You see that the pavement has degraded around those areas. So I don't know if that's an inspection thing. I don't know if it was inspected and it passed at the time. I don't know what contributes to that, but I know that they're having issues with it now. And because it's not a city street, eventually the residents are going to have to pay for that because the developer's out of it.
I don't know how the city deals with this or how you would be involved, but there's a cautionary tale here in that when you look at development and you're looking at the city limits and the limits of annexing in Texas and ETJs and all this issue, you come up against a lot of land that you kind of would like to annex or put in your ETJ, and it was built out under county standards, which means the roads really are not going to be in very good shape in a fairly short time. I mean, the asphalt overlays 2 inches is the requirement versus, say, 3, sometimes 4. So you get road failure is the point. And so I don't know how that gets built into a code or anything else, but certainly I'd like the city to pay attention to what they take hold of.
Makes sense. Build it right to start with.
I've only seen one instance of roads getting messed up, and that's in the Dry Creek or Dry River area. And I'd never seen anything like that before. I was quite shocked. So I'm, sad to hear that apparently that's more common than I realized. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I may be misunderstanding the question, but I noticed that a lot of the roadways and subdivisions and things like that have been really wide, and that leads to a lot of speeding. I live right off of the 35, right? And there's a driveway road that goes to one of the apartment complexes behind mine. And it's so long and wide that people tear up that road, screaming down the street. And it's dangerous for one, and it's loud for the people who live around it. So, I mean, if there's a way to keep the streets narrow, especially for a driveway like that, probably be a lot better.
So a more right-sized street section, maybe. It sounds like also thinking about some prescriptive traffic calming.
Yeah.
Did we do it?
I think so.
We did it, y'all.
And Madam Chair, I would note that the public notice of this meeting said it was from 6:30 to 8:30.
Right on time. Right on time. Yeah, look at that. I hadn't even noticed
Yeah,
that.
just so y'all know what to expect coming up. We'll be having some more workshops and public engagement going forward. We'll also be having a very similar conversation to this with your city council in I think 2 weeks. Is it 2 weeks? Yeah, you're nodding, so 2 weeks. And some other stakeholder engagement as well. Again, we're early in this process. You'll be seeing more of us as we go through this. There's very likely going to be points where if we've got some code draft language that we want to bounce off of you, that it will actually come before you before it's a fully baked development code along the way. But you'll be seeing more of us is the main point. And I really appreciate y'all's discussion here. This is a lot to ask of a volunteer board to get deep into the weeds. And y'all did a great job, so thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And Is
Thank
there
you.
a timetable, roughly speaking, a deadline or a time horizon that you're working with in terms of completion?
So we're structured with, our schedule that we've designed is a 15-month schedule. We've set it up as an 18-month, so we've got some space for if we have to push pause, need to rework something, we can do that. But we're talking about a 15 to 18-month time period to get this start to finish. The target for the diagnostic report is probably that going to city council sometime around August. And from there, we'll start working on code language pretty much immediately to get that set up and rolling.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
very excited to see what y'all, I don't know, what your brains come up with. This is fun, so appreciate you. And yeah, with that, we have made it to the end of our meeting. So I want to say thank you to city staff for staying so late. And PEC, y'all are troopers, so way to go. And yeah, we have no further business items that can be discussed. We've been through the full agenda, so we are adjourned at 8:30.